I'm the Deputy General Manager of Assessment at Worksafe. My role is to oversee the inspectors who do your inspections of some of your sites that are here, and that's across the whole country, and I also look after national programs, of which the Canterbury Rebuild is one of them. And I'm delighted to be here tonight. It's always really fantastic to see such a great turnout when we talk about health and safety. I have to say, it shows me how much has changed. When I was turning up as the key speaker, we might be lucky to get 12 people, maybe 20. And now here we have just about your whole, I'd say probably every member here represented tonight. So it's great to see. So anyone who's seen me speak before or seen one of our standard presentations will know that before I kind of talk more about the legislation, I normally launch into a negative story about all of the injury and death that I've seen. I've been in the game for 14 years and I've definitely seen a lot of things, a lot of really sad consequences for families out there. But not tonight. So tonight is a positive story. Tonight it's a story really about a community, and that is you, who have turned, a tragic event into an absolutely galvanising opportunity. Now is that chance to improve our industry's health and safety for the whole country and our results, definitely for Christchurch. So I've been incredibly impressed by the work of the Safety Charter. I've spent the whole afternoon and with the steering group today, and I have to say a huge well done to everybody. The work and the time and the money and the commitment that you've all put into this is making sure everyone involved in the Canterbury Rebuild goes home safely at the end of their workday, and that's really inspiring for us. And I think you'll find completely aligned to Worksafe's vision that we have for our whole country as well. So I'm here tonight to talk about the new health and safety legislation, and I know most of you in the room are probably really well versed in what that is and why it's been implemented, so we're not going to run through that whole story again. Well, we know that New Zealand has a problem with health and safety in the workplace, and we know that things have to change. So I'm sure many of you are also really clear on the new legislation, what it means, how it may change for you or your business. But what I do want to talk about tonight is actually how we as a regulator, how Worksafe are going to apply some of these new concepts. So before I start, I'd like to recognise that the Safety Charter is really well aligned with that new legislation. So if you're looking for a place to start, if you don't know where to begin, then actually the Charter is a good place to start. It's a good place as any, and it's going to be really useful for you. So the Charter members area has tools that can actually help you with this, your self-assessment tool in particular. And as Graham mentioned earlier, work is underway to review that Charter in light of how the new legislation will fit and how to ensure that it supports some of those legislative components as well. So, and also, as a regulator, we spend a lot of time dealing with myths. And it's myths, things like paper cuts in workplace are going to be a big deal, things like that. We all know that that's not true. But the focus of the new law is actually on proportionate risk management. And it takes quite a bit to see the change in the focus that the new leg has from that hazard focus to a risk assessment focus. So a hazard, I guess if we're going to explain, is anything that can cause harm, whereas a risk is the likelihood that someone could be seriously harmed by that hazard. The approach still requires the hazards to be identified, but then it requires the consequences of the exposure to the hazard, so that's the harm, and the likelihood or the potential of those consequences from being realised. And you need to be able to do that. You need to be able to assess that using an appropriate risk assessment approach. And I know former members of the Charter have probably come to presentations and workshops that have been held on risk assessment. So the assessment then enables businesses to prioritise and focus on managing so far as reasonably practicable. It's a little bit different to the all practicable steps that we've used to have. The most significant risks before you manage the lower level risks. So it is about prioritising. And the process of assessment helps businesses to balance those consequences and the likelihood of harm with the suitability, the availability and the cost of controls more readily. The cost is the last thing that you need to look at, and that is legislated for as well. So in terms of our approach, what we want to see from duty holders is for you to be thinking more broadly about risk. And that means you need to take into account the likelihood, the consequences of a harmful event from occurring. You need to consider your risks. You need to consider your combinations of risks and understand the causes for both health and safety. Health just as important. Safety gets a lot of publicity, but health is just as important. So we need to see that you're thinking about all of the factors that might help manage and address those risks. You know, some examples would be things like improved business systems, some of your practices, your equipment, your training, your culture and your attitudes towards health and safety. And I guess, if I'm being honest, belonging to something like the Charter is a really good symbol for us of how your health and safety culture is, what that's like in your business. And of course, right, what you need to know. So for the purposes of managing risk, the term reasonably practicable is actually about a balance. It's about a balance between what's possible and the highest level of protection and what is achievable, what's reasonable in the circumstances. So you need to consider what is reasonably able to be done in relation to ensuring the health and safety of your workers and of others, taking into account lots of different factors, including things like the likelihood of the harm, the degree of harm, what you know about the harm and about the risk and what some of the known controls are, and the availability and the suitability of the ways to eliminate the risk. So only after assessing the extent of the risk and the available ways of eliminating them should cost be considered. It's the last factor. Consideration should take precedence only over safety when it's grossly proportionate to the risk. So if we were to think of a scaffolding for one of the major anchor projects that we've been hearing about today, it's quite proportionate that you'd spend thousands, a few $1,000s on some scaffolding to make that safe for everybody for that length of time. But it wouldn't be sensible, it wouldn't be proportionate to put scaffolding up if you were collecting a ball off a roof, if you're a caretaker or something like that. It wouldn't be practicable. We're not looking for every step that could be possibly taken. We're looking for what's proportionate. So the Safety Charter is very risk focused, and it covers both those critical risks and the site safety risks, as well as other areas supporting that risk management. So there's some great resources on the Charter website that can actually help you manage some of those key critical risk areas in the rebuild, and that includes posters and toolbox talks. Okay, so the new law helps businesses with health and safety risk management by making everyone responsible. So it's not about am I liable, it is what am I liable for, what are my responsibilities? And everyone's responsibilities are quite a bit clearer. So it recognises that there's a modern working relationship, including moving away from that traditional employer-employee relationship to defining work and workers in much broader sense, including trainees, volunteers, loaned employees, hired labour. So we recognise that businesses often work together and are co-located together. Therefore, cooperation on health and safety is one of the key model concepts of the bill, and it is one of the most effective and pragmatic approaches that we've got. It's especially true for many of you here in the room. So construction is one of the key areas. You'll often be on sites with others. You'll often be exposed to hazards that are created from other people doing other parts of the build. So it makes sense that you would communicate with each other and cooperate. Right. So when I've been particularly impressed with how the Charter has embraced all of the facets of the working relationships. So particularly with the establishment of the Charter Officer, Libby, and you've already heard the amazing work that's been done in that space last year. That Charter is a really inclusive model. It engages business, engages leaders, workers, unions and others in the industry, all who help improve that health and safety record here in Canterbury. And one of the things you'll find that's missing off the slide, actually we might have to change that, is that includes the government. which is a bit strange, isn't it, really? So we've got Worksafe, we've got ACC, we've got Sierra, all working with the Charter. And when I say working with, I believe the Charter is an example of a new style of relationship that business and industry can have with the government at the moment. It's not a parent style. It's not where the government is the big grown up and they come in and they instruct you what to do and they, tell you what to do. It's actually more one of partnership and collaboration. It's also one of enablement. It's where we might set the expectations and we still have that regulatory function, that involves negative consequences at the end. Maybe some of you have had a notice from us at some stage. Maybe someone's been prosecuted. But we're doing our best to actually work alongside you, to encourage you to take the lead. This is your industry. And the most impressive thing about the Charter is that the people here are all leaders in their own right. They've stuck their hand up and they said, actually, I want to do what I can. It's not good enough. Our health and safety results now are not good enough, and I can make a difference. So for some of the key concepts that are a little bit different, you will have heard of the term PCBU. So that stands for a person conducting a business or an undertaking. And it's quite a broad term and it encompasses all types of modern working arrangements. So a PCBU may be a person when you're referring to sole traders. So self-employed people are PCBUs. However, it usually refers to a business entity such as a company or an undertaking, which is a not-for-profit organisation. So the difference between a business and an undertaking is that businesses are usually conducted with a view to making a profit, you have a degree of organisation, some systems and continuity. Undertakings may have elements of organisation systems and possibly continuity, but they're not usually profit-making or commercial in nature. And I guess some of you probably are already involved as volunteers in some other organisations, so you'll be interested in this from both angles. And I know many of you already understand the difference as well, but if you're not clear, please have a look on our website as well and we'll be able to point you in the right direction about what that means. So a business or undertaking must ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health and safety of its workers and any other workers who are influenced or directed by the business. So before we had a whole chain of different roles involved. The employer, the contractor, the principal, the worker, the loaner worker, we had all of that whole chain in place. So now actually everybody involved is a PCBU, but some of you have different influences and some of you direct the workers to do work and some of you have no influence or control over what your own worker does in a certain space. And then there could also be other people in the vicinity or around or close or in your place of work who could also be harmed or be at risk by the work that's been carried out. So in the context of the Health and Safety at Work Act, that's called our primary duty of care. So all PCBUs have that primary duty of care to workers, so their own workers, to other workers that they might direct or influence, and then to other people. Those are the three key parties there. So that might include a work environment without risks to health and safety. It might be about maintaining safe plant and structures, maintaining systems and processes for the safe use and handling of storage of plant or hazardous chemicals, structures. It could be about providing adequate facilities for the welfare of staff. So welfare is one of the new terms that have come out of our legislation as well. We're thinking about our welfare of our staff. Training, it could be instruction or supervision where it's required. It could be monitoring the health, welfare and conditions of the workers. It could be accommodation that doesn't put health and safety at risk. That's only in certain circumstances where accommodation is owned or managed by the business or undertaking, but it's definitely included in there. It's also about eliminating or minimising and managing the risks. So this one, there's been a lot of angst, I think, in relation to the role of officers. An officer is a person who holds a very senior leadership role in the business and has the ability to significantly influence the management of that business. And a business can have one or more officer. So officers include board members, partners, business owners, and chief executives. Just for role clarification, a person who merely advises or make recommendations to a board or to a chief executive, their role is not that of an officer. The officers have to be at that really, really high level. And in terms of the confusion, there is a lot of confusion and angst. You might recall Peter Jackson pulling out of the workshop board just recently for this reason, saying he couldn't, he did not have the time and effort and ability to be able to manage the day-to-day health and safety of the individuals at Weta Workshop. So unfortunately, anyone here who knows a little bit about that knows that's actually not what the duty of an officer is about. It's actually about due diligence. It's about making sure that your PCBU, your CE, and your workers are abiding by health and safety. You're not personally responsible for the health and safety of individuals there on a day-to-day basis. But having said that, I actually applaud his decision. You know, he decided, I don't have that time and commitment, so I'm going to pull out and leave a space for someone who has, and that's actually the right decision. So this is about leaders, and leadership is one of our key objectives at the Charter. You know, the officer duty is one of due diligence. The officers must basically ensure that their business complies with Health and Safety and Work Act. And that means it's got to take reasonable steps itself, but they're different steps to what you would take on a day-to-day basis. It means that an officer has to have relevant and up-to-date knowledge of workplace health and safety. You have to understand your business's operation and associated health and safety risks generally. And you might think that that's standard practice, but I've certainly met many directors of boards who are perhaps silent partners who have absolutely no idea what the risks are in relation to the work that they're doing there. That's not going to be acceptable in the future. You need to ensure the business has appropriate resources and processes to eliminate and minimise the risk. You need to ensure the business has processes for receiving and considering and responding to information about some of your incidents and hazards and risks. So that's your board meetings. What do you talk about? What questions do you ask? What auditing have you got in place? How do you know what your staff are telling you is happening? The extent of an officer's due diligence duty will obviously depend on the nature of the business's operation and the nature of that officer's responsibility as well. In terms of our approach, we consider health and safety governance to be as important as any other aspect of governance. When you think about, if you sit in a boardroom, what sort of questions do you ask about the finances, for instance? Because due diligence would say there's usually quite a few questions about finance. And how do you compare that with some of the other questions, in particular health and safety questions? What health and safety questions have you got on your agenda there? So boards need to be able to lead from the top, and that includes putting strategies in place that will foster that health and safety culture within their organisations. And we will enforce with officers where there's information that points to systemic failure. So it's probably no surprise that we're going to do that. If we see that failure in governance, it'll be a failure that impacts on the business or undertaking being able to meet its duties. So an example of that would be a failure across multiple sites. Was there a failure that would make us look at an officer and have they been, our officers, and have they been meeting their duty? Or if there were a series of incidents over a period of time, we might be asking questions about that too. So what do you know about these incidents? How have you been investigating them? What's been happening there? And then one other concept that is really interesting, that of a worker and of other people as well. So a worker then is an individual who carries out work in any capacity for the business or undertaking, and that, as I've said before, includes employees, it includes contractors and subcontractors, it includes employees of labour hire companies, apprentices, trainees, people doing work experience or on a work trial, and volunteer workers. Everybody within that category is classed as a worker. And workers and others on site also have duties, which is very interesting because a lot of workers in the past have never really realised that they also had a responsibility. So the other big change, I think, which is quite an interesting change in the Act, is that actually now workers and other people also have a duty. It's a really interesting concept. So in the past, we've always said, we've placed the duty on the place of work, but actually now we're talking about other people who are there in the place of work also have that duty. And the others, when we're talking about them, include casual volunteers, visitors to a workplace, customers, public who have come in contact with a business work activity. So people like shoppers. There's always been a responsibility to look after them, but now they actually have a duty themselves. So that duty then is for workers and others to take reasonable care to ensure that the health and safety on themselves and others in the workplace is met. They have to follow any reasonable health and safety instructions given to them by the business, and workers have an extra duty, and that is to cooperate with any reasonable business policy or procedure relating to the health and safety in the workplace. So quite a different way of framing what their duties and their responsibilities are. So in terms of our approach, we will consider the actions and duties of all people during our visits, that's everybody. But our focus of attention will actually be on the parties who have that greatest control or influence in a particular circumstance. So yes, there are circumstances where a worker or another person may have breached their duties, but we would always look first to the PCBU to see how did you enable your worker to meet their duties, and if there's been a breach, why, and where was the PCB in relation to the control of that person. So when deciding what action to take in response to incidents where others at a workplace have been harmed, we will consider the extent to which the harm resulted from their own acts and omissions. So where the behaviour of others has resulted in an event or harm to any person, we may investigate, and any action we take will be proportionate and it'll be reasonable. That's a promise. You've told me to that now. So this is also another key new concept, that of overlapping duties. So when the work of two or more businesses overlap, and an example of that would be a work site, or through a contracting chain, you must work together to fulfil your duties of care. So where your duties overlap, then you need to consult, cooperate and coordinate activities to meet the health and safety responsibilities to workers and to others as well. So some of the ways in which you might do that would be to plan ahead, to think about some of the stages of the work and how others might be affected by it, identify the risks to be managed in a shared way, in a shared format, consult the other businesses on your site and agree how to control that risk. And also you can agree which PCBU is best placed to do that as well. Define roles, responsibilities, define actions, and explain those to others so that they know what to expect. But also to continue to communicate and cooperate and carry out that reasonable and proportionate monitoring to make sure that health and safety is maintained. So in terms of our approach to that, we expect that you should be able to explain the steps to us that show us that you've taken some steps to consult and to cooperate and coordinate with other PCBUs. So we will be expecting that from our multi-site visits. We may check whether arrangements, including monitoring, are working well, and that they reflect your level of influence and control, and what is reasonably practicable in the circumstance. So it has to be proportionate, has to be right. We will look for arrangements which are sensible and proportionate. And those at the top of the contracting chain should show the leadership the most. They need to be able to encourage that good practice through the supply chain and use sound contractor management processes and avoid pushing the risk down the chain. You can't actually contract out of your responsibilities, but you can consult and agree for one party to be responsible for doing it. You then need to probably maintain or monitor that they are actually indeed doing what you've agreed to do. So upstream duties in the supply chain is also another new concept. So Worksafe recognises that it's actually more efficient and effective, to work with upstream PCBU businesses to prevent some of those risks from occurring in the first place. So this is where we will be looking at risks emerging from design, from manufacturing, from importation or supply, all of those different stages. So rather than trying to tackle that same risk over and over again in multiple workplaces with the PCBU, where possible, we will look up that chain to see, could the designer have designed this feature out? Did the supplier check that they had the right certification from a piece of equipment that they've sourced from China? Has the supplier given, or has the manufacturer manufactured this structure, this piece of equipment to actually be fit for purpose? All of those things will be looked at by us. And we may engage with designers in New Zealand to promote the design of business processes that first eliminate or then minimise risk. We may engage with them to help them with that. And I know it's definitely one of our new objectives of the charters to look at the upstream duties and how we might influence in that area. So because much of the plant used in New Zealand is designed and manufactured elsewhere, we consider that importers, suppliers and installers have just as important part to play in this, including that responsibility for ensuring that the equipment that they're bringing into the country is fit for purpose. If we see a design or a manufacturing fault that has contributed to a health and safety risk at work, then we may follow up with that upstream PCBU in business. We're more likely to follow up where there is a pattern of failures, not a one-off incident, but a pattern of failures. So worker participation is also another key concept in the new Act. All businesses should have planned and well-known ways to engage with their workers and support their participation in health and safety matters. So that will help you in your business to make better decisions and to keep your people and your productivity thriving. So workers are the eyes and ears of your business, and you know, they know where all the health and safety pressure points are. They know where all the hazards are and what's working and what's not. Businesses have two related duties, one to engage with workers and the other one to enable them to participate in improving health and safety. So you must ensure workers' views on health and safety matters are taken into account. It's not saying that you have to do what the workers are saying, it's saying you must take their views into account. So that's your engagement. And you must have clear and effective ongoing ways for the workers to suggest improvements or raise concerns on a day-to-day business without fear of consequences if they say something you're not happy about. That's your participation side of things. So together with your workers, you can actually determine the best way to meet those two related duties. What is reasonable and practicable then will depend on your workers' views and needs, the size of your business and the nature of your risks of your business as well. And the focus needs to be on effective practices rather than whether any particular systems or processes are in place. Having said that, there are some criteria in place, which means you may have to elect health and safety reps or have a health and safety committee. Trained health and safety reps will have some powers. They will have the power to cease work or to issue provisional improvement notices as well. To help some of our health and safety reps and to help our businesses understand what that means and how they might work in that space, the Charter is going to put on an event very, very soon, especially for health and safety reps. I guess it's a bit of training, it's a bit of enablement, it's a bit of an ability for them to talk to each other about what some of the common things are that they're seeing there. It's a big thing to be a worker, to be given that responsibility and then to stand up to your boss and cease work or to issue a notice. It's a real big thing. Some of the government department peoples will pick it up and run with it straight like that, I can just about guarantee. But in the private sector, when you're worried about your job and you're worried about what your manager will say, it's a big deal. So they do need to be supported in that space. Something the Charter is going to do, so look out for that. It's going to be communicated in the newsletter, a special Charter event just for health and safety reps. In terms of our approach then to worker participation, when Worksafe conducts assessments and duty holder reviews, we will consider those practices and undertake any necessary education or, where necessary, enforcement activity as well in that space. So when conducting investigations, we will consider whether the quality of the practice has contributed to the incident or the issue. Under the new law, we can be contacted about cease work and provisional improvement notices. So don't think that it is that they have all the power in the world. It's pretty strict. They have to be trained by an approved provider. And even so, you can actually ask us to come and mediate. Mediate's probably not the right word, but resolve some issues that may arise in that space. We can, Worksafe can also consider whether we can suspend a health and safety rep or remove them from office for abuse of their power. But at the end of the day, we do expect that businesses and health and safety reps will actually try to resolve issues between themselves at first. There's some safeguards, but actually this is about engagement. This is about listening to each other and working together in good faith. So if you haven't visited our website recently, it's worth checking out now and over the coming weeks and months. April the 4th is coming up fast, and we're constantly putting new fact sheets and different details onto our website. We've revamped our Health and Safety Work Act pages in a way that we've been told is a lot more user-friendly. It focuses on making it easy for businesses to comply. We know that if we make it easy to do it, it'll be done. And we've made it easy to identify what it is that you need to know and what you need to do. We're progressively adding new information resources all the time, and we'll continue to do that over the weeks and months as we come to kind of understand the legislation and what it means for us. So I think we're all kind of in the same space. We might have had a little bit more in-depth knowledge, but we're still learning about what we can do with some of these new concepts and how we might be able to utilise those concepts to incentivise really good health and safety practice in this country. So in addition to some of the more traditional guides and the fact sheets that we have, we'll begin to publish online in March. We're also developing a range of practical tools and resources. Some of those can be used by any business, some will be tailored to particular sectors, including construction. We're working on case studies that are individually sector related so that you can relate to what they're saying and you can see how they might have put some of these concepts in practice. We're really interested in your feedback in relation to that as well. We want to know what works for you. So it's a big question, and I'm sure many of you are well past the start point here, but it may be really helpful to put the processes in place if you haven't yet started. So again, please use our website, sign up for the latest news and alerts, to keep up to date. And of course, we're here to ask if you need extra help. Also, as charter members, make use of the resources and the support that's available to you. The Charter website has some great risk management tools, self-assessment tools, fact sheets, a lot of information in there, and it's really, really well worth using. I would recommend, I can't say enough, recommend you go and have a look at the Charter website and see what tools are available to you for free. And in fact, many consultants charge people for some of the tools that you're getting there. This is really good quality work, completely aligned with the new Act. So thank you for your time this evening. We're probably not going to have time for questions, I'm assuming, but I'll be available afterwards if you need. Just want to leave you with this message.
If you're a New Zealand worker watching this, welcome home. New Zealand is a great place to live and to work.
Mostly, but not for everyone.
Did you know that last year, more than 23,000 people were severely injured or killed in New Zealand workplaces?
That's bad enough, but that's about double the rate of Australia.
And 3 times that of the UK.
That has a real cost.
And none heavier than on a family that relies on a loved one.
For a country that's always prided itself on looking out for one another,
It's just not good enough.
We need a new way of thinking about health and safety.
We reckon that all New Zealanders who go to work every day,
No matter what industry they're in,
or job they do,
should be able to return home healthy and safe.
getting you home healthy and safe. That's what we're working for.